Hey, it's 3 o'clock. Sweet.
It's 3 o'clock. Hello, everyone. Welcome to another We Have a Cave Troll stream. My name is Matt Elliott. I go by Snario on the message boards, and we also have with us.
Orion, also known as Alan, Mackie, I guess. Forgive me, I'm a little under the weather, not feeling super great. Got the cold that's been going around Massachusetts.
Same. The wonders of having a family is you share everything, and in my case, it's my kid bringing home the flu.
And
Fun
I'm
times.
fortunate it was just a cold.
But
So yeah, today's going to be an interesting one, right? Because it's more of an ask us anything
yep.
than a planned outing where we have an agenda or anything. Not that we've
Well,
really ever had an
like I was
agenda.
joking before, it was more ask Orion everything, and maybe I'll get a world question here or there.
And like I said before, the first one that's on here is about our favorite NPC, and the players did say that they were going to what was it that they said they were going to do to us if we said a certain name?
Tarred
Oh,
and
tarred and
feathered.
feathered. Yeah,
If it was a
that's a
certain
really
character.
yeah. Sadly, that probably is our favorite, right?
So
I mean, if I'm
why
being
don't we
honest,
just say it then? What is
I mean,
our favorite character?
it's Sarah Oakhart. It has to be. She's the most reviled character in the entire game. I love her.
I I know she was for a very long time kind of intended to be this running joke of a character. And I don't think anyone really intended for her to have the role in the story that she had. But then one of our designers was just like, you know what? We're going to make her important. And then we got Sarah Oakhart. Um, I I have like she is a component of I think one of my favorite experiences watching players play our game
Oh my
um,
God,
with
yes.
with the story reveal because I we had and I don't know how much we should talk about because I mean granted it is almost 20 years since this content came out, so like I don't know, I think we're well beyond spoilers at this point.
Yeah, I think we're well beyond spoilers, definitely.
But so the reveal of Sarah Oakhart as a Marthiel, I like I we patched in that update. We started the story, with the story beats for that, and I remember on patch day logging in and listening into the player chat regarding the instance where the reveal happened, and the collective jaw dropping that hit the floor of every single group of players that we were paying attention to, that we were watching.
Oh yeah.
Like it was all the same reaction, and it was really just a satisfying culmination of what started out as a joke turning into something that was like really powerful and impactful on the players in a way that I don't think they were expecting.
Yeah, it was that dun 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 moment, right? Where everybody just kind of put it all together. It was great. It was fantastic. I thought Kath did a great job on that.
Yeah. No, I think that's one of those characters that sticks near and dear to all of our hearts. At least the people that have worked on the project for a very very long time. Like there, as frustrating as she is, there's fond memories.
Yeah,
Very fond
definitely.
memories.
Just because of what she represented, I think, for us
Yeah.
going through the whole release to reveal. I agree. There's a lot of questions about what's coming up, right? So
There there is.
we've got this big deed log thing that we've been working on for a while, long while, that players finally got to see, and they're asking if it's mostly cosmetic or if it's all cosmetic. The majority of it is cosmetic. There are some efficiencies that have been built in on the back end to make things a little bit faster in the way that the data is actually fished up. But it is mostly a cosmetic change. And to be clear, I don't believe there's going to be an option to keep the old version right now. I don't think that was something that was possible with the way that we redid it. Um, just based off of what I recall from the earlier discussions on it.
I think stuff like the deed log is something that's really much needed for Lotro. It doesn't reinvent that panel, but it does help present it in a way that will just help it be more manageable. Because I think the horizontal tabbing that we had for a long time, it, it worked for the launch of the game, but now that the game is so big, it needed better organization.
Well, I mean, there were a couple of things, right, that were kind of fighting against it. Like if we had sat down and said, "Oh yeah, we need to have this thing with all these tabs that you can select, like they're markers in a novel that somebody's putting on the outside for the pages that they thought were really important," we probably would have come up with a better solution than we have now, where it's, oh, it rings the
Yeah.
entire outline of the book. That was it wasn't like it was an oversight. It was just I think a longevity thing where we didn't really expect that things would go as long as they did, and uh, we've been kind of honest about how difficult it is to work with our UI elements, just because of the era in which they were created. When you think about how old the game is at this point and how old the engine is at this point, the fact that we can still make even minor updates to our UI is a testament to, the ability of our engineers to be able to decipher code that's, like you just said, over 20 years old. Like
Yeah.
it's really old, and the tools really kind of show that too. So it's nice to at least have a visual upgrade to it, and a small systemic and performance boost in the back end on it too. I mean, we still know there's a couple of bugs with them, and we're getting closer to making sure that they're all out before it pushes out the door. But I think that overall the change is going to be a really positive one for the deed
Well,
log, and it looks like it is. I see a lot of like, hey, it'd be great if it also did this too, which is usually typical of it's a good change.
I think one of the things too that we have over the last few years started thinking about the game in ways that I don't think we collectively as a team had really thought about for a very long time. Like, at the launch of the game, we were very focused on graphics performance, right? And
Yeah.
that was our metric for how something worked. It was like, oh, frame rate equal this, that equal good. And now we're looking at our features, our systems, our landscape, and whatnot from, oh, yeah, landscape frame rate, fine, whatever. Server frame rate, and I
Yeah.
think too
Yeah.
with the deed log, it's another case of like, we built that original thing, the original UI and whatnot, without really a sense of user experience associated with it, because in part because the modern definition of what user experience design is didn't exist
Oh,
in
no, definitely not.
2001,
I mean,
right? Like
now there's
I
a
don't
whole
even
science around it, right?
right. So like I think now, even though none of us are classically user experience designers, we've all kind of dipped our toes into it, and we have a sense for how we can approach reworking things like the deed log and some of the other panels that um, may or may not get updated this year, with a mind towards a better user experience and making it more functional, even if the changes to it itself is minimal, making it a little bit more functional for the players in the way that a modern player would tend to use this sort of thing.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny when you sit down and you think about how much UI has changed. You think about what mobile devices have really done to us in terms of what is considered acceptable UI at this point. Games are probably still the most inaccessible UI UX experiences that there are, because I mean, both you and I know, having worked in a different location specifically around an app, um, it's about how fast you get to what you want to do.
Yeah,
Number of clicks is like tantamount to everything, right? It's or paramount to everything rather. It's you want the fewest amount of clicks. You don't want to have to tap more than once or twice to get to what you want. And in games, like especially with ours, with so many different subfields and subtabs, and oh, it goes on, and it's so deep and it's so maddening. Like when we were doing our recent play days of stuff, we're all just like, we really should probably change some of the ways that some of our settings are built out, because we keep looking at it. It's like, why is this particular flag to show something, to surface something to the player hidden in the social panel when really it's a combat UI experience thing.
Yeah.
But it's just like, oh, it got placed there at some point in time. And just going back and looking at it, it's like, wow, that's rough. Um,
Well, and oftentimes a lot of those things, it wasn't someone in one of our development groups that was responsible for
no.
implementing it too, because it was like, oh well, this kind of feature is more considered an engine feature
Mhm.
than a game feature. And so, in order to maintain kind of engine parity with this version of the game and other versions of the engine that might be
And
used
other
for other
games.
games,
Yep.
we need to put this fix here instead, which
Yeah.
then kind of took ownership of that out of our hands and into another group's hands who aren't necessarily working day to day within that code for that specific project. So they don't necessarily know how those things are supposed to work. They just kind of were like, well, this needs to generally work. And generally is a good starting point for
Mhm.
things, but then you really need to focus in on okay, but now product specific. How do we
Yeah.
change general into product specific?
Yep. And that's kind of been the difficulty as we continued forward and we got smaller and smaller. And now we're very small, but we are trying to make some inroads there too when we can. And I think the deed log is a really good jumping off point. And I think
Mm-hmm.
that the way that people are kind of responding to it certainly have pleased me. And I know that the engineer has been spending the most time on it, and the UI the UI team that's been working on it are happy with the feedback. So that's good. I'm just going to keep going through this first list, and then there's a question up there that I saw in the stream that I
There's a
think
couple of
you want to
questions,
answer. I think you're going to want to answer the one about Lalia though, because I think that's kind of in
and
your
the one
wheelhouse right
directly above
now.
that.
Yeah, I saw them both, and I want to make sure that you get to answer those. Boost coming for hunters more than the current 5% on borer. Not determined at this point. I don't think there's going to be much in the way of changes to the overall thing because the hunter is slated for more of a full refresh coming up sometime around the summer. That's going to be revealed in the next big update that I do for the Litter of the Players. That'll be at the end of March. 64-bit servers, they are an exciting change. We think so too. Um, are we going to give you the dates today? No, we're not going to give you the dates today. That's upcoming, and I think that Cordovan will be explaining that as we get closer to when that release date is. Are there any new deed rewards coming with the birding update? The answer is there's new deeds, there's new birding pieces. I don't know that we got much in the way of new cosmetic aspects for it, but there might be a couple of new um, other pieces that are being created. And I know that the dev who's been working on the yeah, see, this is what happens when you're sick. Baubles. The dev who's working on the bauble system is hard at work making more of those, and I know that we're going to be working on a lot of that stuff moving forward. And I
I
know you didn't
spent
hear
a
me
lot
say
of time
forward.
last night looking through cupboards and cabinets where all the dishes and cups are, and then I remembered, oh, I'm looking for a knife.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Illness is
yay,
great.
being sick.
Um, so kinship refresh. Can we please get more ranks for kinship members? All right. I'm gonna go into this later on this year. There is, when I say that, I don't want to. This isn't me pushing that off indefinitely. We are taking an approach with the kinship refresh in a very measured way to make sure that we are doing things that make sense, that prove out the new system that we're building toward, and really hit the points that we're trying to do. I think the core idea of our kinship refresh is to return to the social nature of the kinship and make it more about the socialization and doing things together as a kinship. Uh, that means that we want more tools to be available to the people who run kinships and who are part of kinships, and for uh, being part of a kinship to end up being more rewarding for your characters overall. Um, I will get deeper into that as we get closer and more in depth into the actual development. What I can tell you now about the development is that we are hard at work at removing a lot of the performance issues that kinships uh, due to the game because of the manner in which it was originally developed and originally implemented. Matt and I both know that the fundamental basis for the way that it was created goes all the way back to Asheron's Call.
Hmm.
And if you go all the way back to Asheron's Call with the way that the data was managed, um, it wasn't exactly managed very well. And one of the biggest things that we're trying to do is to set up the management system so that it's more responsive and allows us to do more with that particular system. So there's a lot to really go into on that. As we get closer to the first stage of the kinship update pieces, I'm probably going to do a solo stream on it to really explain what has gone into it and what we're planning on doing over time. Um, but suffice it to say, there is a real focus on kinship this year. And now I'm going to push it back over to Matt to answer the next couple of questions here.
So yeah, these are a couple questions from the Twitch chat itself. Old time Lotra player says, "Thanks for having us here today. I have a quick question. Has there been any progress on premium elf homes?" And there has been. The neighborhood is effectively built at this point, and we're working on figuring out how we want the hook systems to work in each house and whatnot. The person who's building it hasn't built a neighborhood since the original neighborhoods, so he really wanted to use this as an opportunity to like refresh himself on it because there had been a lot of changes that have happened over the last 15 years or so since the original neighborhoods were introduced. So he had a lot of catch up and to learn on there. And once he's done with that, we just kind of go into polish mode. We've got to request some new art for some of the buildings in there because we don't want it to look the same as Falithorn housing. But then after that, it's just a matter of it kind of sitting and baking until it's ready to go live whenever we find an opportunity for it. And then there's another question right under that asking if there are any big reveals in store about Lalia. I'm guessing that to mean the marketplace. Um, Not for 43, but for 44, I'm going to be doing a little bit of rework on the actual physical shell of the space just to make it a little bit more compelling and useful for people. Because right now, the main entrance that everyone comes through is technically the back entrance to it. So none of the really interesting and useful stuff is immediately accessible. So we're going to be doing some layout changes to the space, and then also thinking about ways that we can get more rotation into it and whatnot. But that is a 44 and onward project. It's nothing for 43.
No, but there are some changes that we're looking at there. So there was somebody mentioned that the deed log is crashing. Yeah, we know that there's a bug. We're fixing it, and before it goes live, obviously that'll be gone. Um, there was sorry, I lost the screen. Where is it? There it is. Oh, my Lanta. Okay, so let's move down a little bit further. What should we grab next? Oh no, we're not going to get mushroom hunters as a new hobby. Sorry. You're probably not going to get mushroom eating as a new hobby either. I'm going straight from here. So class reworks are always a bit of a hit and miss. So the summertime right now is when we're looking at the next big changes to class refreshes. The two classes that we're looking at right now are Hunter and Burglar. They're both Hunter is the one that is most obviously in need of help. Burglar is in a better state, but there's enough that needs to be changed with Burglar to uh, to to necessitate some changes and some streamlining um, to make sure that it still functions the way that it really should, and to make all three of the different specializations viable. And if not, then make it two, right? So that's one of the things we've been looking at. Um, I'm sure that when we get closer, on is going to be putting up some discussion points to actually go through it and figure out exactly what it is we're looking for. Um, what is there anything else you wanted to talk about there, or
I
should we
mean,
move on
there was a question about Minhiriath and when or if we would ever get to that, but that is a we'll get to it when we get to it kind of region. I think it's one of those like it's not something that I think anyone has any immediate story plans for. So then it falls into the whenever we might do a fill in the gaps region, it's a potential opportunity. But like so many unfinished, unbuilt landscape regions, it is a potential opportunity.
So there's a question here about skirmishes and loot. Okay.
Lots of questions about skirmishes.
Skirmishes and specifically skirmish marks. This is a consistent discussion on the system side of things because the skirmish system really has not been updated, and you obviously can't advance your skirmish soldiers beyond a certain point, right? So this is a really I don't want to this isn't a cop out, right? This is a frank discussion on like what we talk about here. When we discuss skirmish marks and skirmish medallions and the skirmish loot system in general, there is really kind of a collective sigh amongst us because we really want to do something with it, but it's not an easy thing to just either excise or completely revamp. Because if we were to take that and turn and make it so you could level your skirmish soldier up all the way to 150 or 160 with your characters, right? It would take an awful lot of work to get that into the space. We have toyed with the idea of just culling the skirmish marks and skirmish medallions from instances and raids. And every time that we talk about that, like it's one of those things where we don't know what the backlash would be, right? Would this be something that you would accept, or is it be something that would really bother you? But at the same time, there's really not much else for you to be able to purchase from the skirmish vendors with it, and we don't have any direct plans right now to go back and redo a lot of that. I think one thing that has really kind of pushed skirmishes back to the fore is the fact that we do have the legendary servers where players have been using them again, or are going to start using them again, or have been using them, and as a result, um, there's been a little more emphasis on it. Right, the last one that we did was all the way back in before the shadow at this point, right?
Yep.
So that was the last time that we did a skirmish, and the the reward structure that we put in there was kind of antithetical to the way that skirmishes had always rewarded players in the past. So it's a question of what role does a skirmish really hold now? And is it a system that we want to really continue supporting as we move forward? And additionally, do we want to find a way to make it easier for you to have a traveling companion and allow you to have skirmish soldiers on landscape more often? These are all questions that we don't have answers to. These are questions that come up. But on the whole, skirmishes are behind a great number of other things that we really think are more pressing. One of them was asked in the chat, and that was the level downscaling. Is that still on the wish list? Yeah, it's still on the wish list. It's something that we really want to. It's something that we really want to do. It's something that we wanted to do hand in hand with the kinship refresh. But circumstances are are such that we're not going to be able to do them at the same time. So we're going to have to figure out like how that fits in, where it fits in, and schedule it correctly. And don't forget that Matt and I have our super secret thing that we really want to push, and some changes, some underpinnings that have been put in are proving that it's the right direction for us to move in. So where all this ends up falling out is really a question of time, and then what ends up rising above or rising below, like all these different and disparate systems that we have. So long answer, I apologize, but we aren't really doing anything right now with skirmishes or rewards.
I mean, one of the challenging things, and I think you touched on it briefly in that bit as well, was like, and it is a good problem to have, but we have lots of ideas. And unfortunately, having a big volume of ideas doesn't mean that all of those ideas are going to coalesce into something. And there's no shortage of things that we would love to do, no shortage of things that if we had the time we could do. But we also have our usual product schedule that we want to follow. We want to make sure that we're getting new stuff out there as well. And so it's like I said, it's really tricky to have all of these ideas and have to be like, okay, we're gonna pause this idea
Yeah.
in order to fit in this thing here, and now that pushes that idea that we paused even further down the road. And sometimes there's that question of like, oh well, you paused it and there wasn't a big demand for it, so does that mean that we should even bother with it? That kind of question. Like,
Yeah, and
if you were able to push it out, then it must not have been that important. And
and it
that's a tough
also,
thing to like to like tell people like it's still important. It's just there are other things that have greater priority.
yeah, and I mean the other thing is that that doesn't even take into account that sometimes there are things that rise to the surface because they're just absolute necessities. Like the game is crashing. Why is the game crashing? Why are we dealing with, X, Y, or Z? What just happened that has forced our engineers uh to completely like refocus where they need to what they need to be working on because of something heinous that's happened that was completely unforeseen. Which sadly is probably like the biggest thing that undercuts the primary goals that we have. So, Matt, I don't know if you saw it, but somebody just said, "Do we have any big plans for our 20th anniversary?" Now we know that's a couple of years away,
Yeah.
and that's really the super secret thing that Matt and I have been hinting at for God 3 years now. Um, the answer is if we can get everything to line up, and I think we can agree that we are making steps in that direction,
Mm-hmm.
specifically with things that are coming out this year, with some of the changes that will be tied into kinships and potentially housing and the way that those work. That we're growing closer and closer to being able to have more frank conversations about what that is. Um, if I get my druthers, which normally, and the ongoing joke inside of the studio is that I don't get my druthers, um, it would be a year-long celebration for the game, where everything is kind of building along the lines, and there are aspects of the major feature coming out over the course of that year. But really, what we're trying to do, and I think what we've got to at this point, is we're going to have a more uh, accessible release cadence for you, the players, and for us, the developers, so that you know when things are coming. You kind of can expect what's going to be happening for those different releases. And we're going to hopefully be able to hit that from now until the end of this year. And then we'll move on into next year. And then the year after, we'll hopefully be celebrating the 20th anniversary with a really special inclusion and addition to the game. I think it's pretty damn special, personally.
I mean, not
You're all,
many games can claim what we will be claiming soon
I
in
know,
the next
20
couple
years,
of
man.
years. So
Yeah. There's only one other out there, right?
something
Oh,
definitely to like hang a feather in the cap on.
yes.
Um, Maybe we'll get another cool brick like we used to do for product launches. I miss those.
Yeah.
They were the like they were like I don't know what material it was, but it was almost like an award trophy saying like
Yeah, kind of.
congratulations, you launched a game. Here's this cool looking thing to put on your desk saying you launched a game.
I've got to have one somewhere. I just don't know where it is. Um,
I have my Lotro and my Asheron's Call Throne of Destiny ones up on my shelf right next to the mini Bobo.
oh, my mini Bobo. Poor Bobo. Level squish. So yeah, we're not going to talk about level squish right now. Um, if there's something that has to happen, we can be. I see that right there.
Mini
I can be
Bobo.
frank about. I can be frank about the fact that we have to look at the way that our statistics are continuing to move up. That doesn't mean that we're going to do a full-on level squish. We have to have discussions internally. We'd have to explain everything to the players. It's not something that we are even remotely talking about at this time. Let's see. Let's start combing through the. You see anything in the chat you want to talk about, or you want to grab some of the
Um,
stuff off the
let's
site?
keep going through the thread.
All right.
So there's one post where someone was asking about um, updates to the landscape for things like older zones. Things like how
Yep.
we
Saw
did
that.
an update to the Barrow Downs to improve the fog and grass and whatnot in those areas. Um, and I think those are very much a like if there is a reason driving us to do those things, I think that's when we'll hit them. You know, a lot of those changes that were mentioned there were all things that were part of the legendary server initiatives. Honestly, one of the first things that I did when I first came back to work for Lotro was going through and polishing those older regions to try to bring them up to a higher visual standard compared to where they were at. Um, and so I feel like we went through and did a bunch of that kind of polish, and then we kind of hit a point in our landscape development where that kind of polish isn't really necessary anymore. You know, I think our original regions, some of them definitely looked a little rough and they needed a little pick me up. But you know, you start heading into places like Moria, Lothlorien. There are things we could do, but you really at that point have to question like, okay, how much does doing those things gain us in those regions? Are we better suited to spending that energy on working on new things that we need to work on or finding other ways to better improve the look and feel of things through more programmatic efforts as opposed to hand placed efforts? Um, Another question there saying that now the Moria stables have been updated. Can we get some of the other older routes, such as North Downs, Angmar, and Foreshell, updated? Again, that's another one of those like if we have a reason to be in those areas, then it makes sense. Might make sense to do that work. But if we don't have a particular reason for us to go there and do that work, it is something that gets put on the like back burner task list of like, oh, okay, I've got some free time now while I'm like waiting on something. I could maybe pull from this to do that. So, um, and then there was a comment about more all-in craft guilds, like in Galtrev, and crafting
Yeah.
halls like in Galtrev, and asking if something like that could be put in 21st Hall. And that's always a like balancing act with
Oh
those
man,
because
first
originally
call.
we didn't want everything all together all at once, and then Galtrev was built, and now we're like, well, damn. If we want people to use anything going forward, it has to be at least as usable as Galtrev. And so that kind of like ties our hands. You know, it keeps us from making creative decisions because the functionality of the space is too good.
Yeah, it's not an easy thing to say. Yeah, we want to pile everything into the same spot. It's been one of the things we were just discussing with the content team just now was the the vendors who sell the Embers gear. Uh, we've been lax in placing them into the newer zones, so we're planning on dropping those into Iridir and probably Umbar somewhere to make sure that they're available in those zones now too. Because I think the only places that they're currently available are Gundabad and oh, what's the name of that place? Scare. I'm forgetting the name. Um, but yeah, we need to make sure that we start updating things like that. Um, I saw Grot had a question about yeah, thank you, Scarhold. Grot had a question about Siege. So I shouldn't talk about this until March when it's on our future release of of the roadmap, but it's on the roadmap for this year. That's all I can really say about it right now. Um,
So we've got a couple questions in chat. One from Nanaris saying that the visual water visuals are a little weird ever since the Umbar update. Looks great in some places, but super bad in a lot of places. Is this something the landscape team can fix, plans to fix or update? I'd say with any of those, that is a case of please file a bug on them. We have a very big world, and our team is also furiously working to do the various landscape and request work that is coming onto our plate for new development. So stuff like that, file a bug, get it into our system, get it into the process, locations, you know, whack looks, screens, screenshots, like all of those things, just help get it in front of our eyes so that we can determine, oh hey, this is a issue we can fix versus okay, we're going to send this material to art and have them look at that sort of thing. So and then after that, we have old time Lotro player saying, I have a housing question. This has more to do with older homes than premium ones. I know it would be very hard to put hooks for ambient lighting in them. The houses, the houses are very dark, and could you please make more housing items that give off light if you can't add hooks to it? Right now, there's only one item in the game that gives off light. So generally, it's not a good idea to have run of the mill housing items cast a light source. Our engine is built in a way so that only a certain number of lights can influence an object before that object kind of has a meltdown and doesn't know how it's supposed to display itself. That's why in Rohan and Erebor and Lindleby, those neighborhoods have housing lights, hooks, but it is very limited in how many there are, where you can put them, and whatnot. Players are still going to be able to make slash break their space by adding too many of those in, but at least it's a little bit more controlled. Um, I wouldn't expect us to be making a lot of assets that have lights attached to them. Just in general, for performance reasons, for visual reasons, it's generally safer to just rely on the lighting hooks. Will those ever get backported to original neighborhoods? Maybe at some point. I don't have a timetable for that though.
Uh, I'm gonna get to the question about VXP before we close this out. I just wanted to hit a couple of ones from the forums.
Mm-hmm.
Um, there's a question on reward track and whether or not characters that don't earn LI could ever contribute to it. The answer is no. Um, the way that the reward track was built out was specifically for the LI system and the LI system alone. So the only feed that we have into it right now is through the LI system. That does not mean that there won't be a change at some point in time to the way that the reward tracks work, to make sure that more than just that character, more than just those characters could contribute. It'd be a larger change than we really have an appetite for right now, but it's something that we can certainly look at. Uh, Talking about VXP, so um, there's a lot of discussion, certainly among new players and internally too, about how long it takes to effectively build a character for endgame at endgame, right? Um, if you are just a standard player who is going through and putting in the time and not using any of the shortcuts to get what you need in order to be able to really compete or play inside of like a tier 3 uh, raid instance, you spend what is really a considerable amount of time. It can be upwards of 3 months. It's about 3 to 6 months to get everything. When you are talking about if you've just moved up the to a new LI and you have to make sure that you have everything um, for your specific specialization, and you need to get all the VXP that just got bumped to the next levels of virtues, and you have to level up all of your different slots in the LI, so on and so forth. So uh, we we know this is an issue. We are we are now starting to make some changes internally to figure out what the best course of action is along those lines. We do want to make it something that enables you to uh, the real thing that I'm looking at and we're trying to push is a manner that allows subsequent characters on your account to get toward the end game faster, because we think one of the things that really makes the game accessible and enjoyable to a lot of players is the ability to play multiple characters and not just one all the time. So we're looking at how we can do that, what the best course of action is for that, while also maintaining the fact that remain solvent as a company in order to be able to in order to be able to continue to produce the game, right? So it's a balancing act that we're working on, and we're trying to figure out exactly how to do it. But it's something that's definitely on our agenda and something that we've been discussing. And there's going to be some changes coming up in the next 6 months that you'll see that are steps to kind of test the waters on that style of change.
So there was a question I thought I had seen here in chat. Let me see if I can. I might have scrolled past it. All right, so Fivefield One says on water, I'd like an update for high-end machines for reflections to change dependent on viewpoint. I assume it's not a bitmap. So a lot of our water does reflect, but our engine really only knows how to deal with one plane of reflection. So if the only water visible is the ocean, has zero problem reflecting at all. As soon as you start adding in tiers to that, where you might have a pool of water that's a little bit higher up, then our client starts to fight with itself over which angle of reflection that it needs to display, and it doesn't have a good way of intelligently sorting that out. So that's why sometimes, like if you're running through a region that has, a series of step waterfalls, for example, you might see the reflections freak out a little bit as you move up or down, and those new planes become either visible or not visible. Nothing we can really do about it right now. That is just the way our engine works. Um, that's one of the idiosyncrasies and joys of working with such a established engine.
I like the way you said that.
Established.
Established engine. Yeah, that's what it is. It's not just an archaic engine. Um, the so there's a question that I saw um, about the quality of life updates. Um, so this is a funny thing, right? So we decided that we were gonna make a quality of life update for this particular one, and then unfortunately things got pushed, and the rate ended up getting slipped into this, and um, it's kind of pushed the whole quality of life aspect into a. It's not as inspiring or as fun as we really wanted it to be. Uh,
Well, and
there
that's
was
that's a tricky thing to
it
define
is
too,
because
because what is
there's a
quality
lot of
of
things.
life?
Right,
That's subjective,
right,
because there are some things that are near and dear to some people, and other things that like people just don't care about, but they're also
right,
important to
right.
do. And so it
Yeah,
is hard. There's this level of expectation of what like an individual working on a specific thing for quality of life improvement might feel versus the player base and what they think quality of life
right,
means. And
right. I mean, it's funny. Like we can look at it and say, if say our marketing team came to us and said, "So we really want to find out what's in this quality of life thing," it's like, well, do you really want to sit down and talk about bug fixes? Do you really want to talk about like long-standing issues that players have been talking about for years that we're finally getting around to fixing? Because is that really something that's super compelling? And in some regards, yeah, some of those things would be super compelling, and I think they can be used as a way to reach back out to players who may have played the game a long time ago to see if they want to come back and take another look. But I also think that it was this one is not as robust as I expect the next quality of life update to be, right? Because and I'm going to share this, right? The way that we are approaching the quality of life aspects of things is um, we are designers first and foremost, right? We love to design things, and I will tell you right now that Matt has been furiously working on his own pet projects for special things that he would like to
I've
present
got
to us,
UI stuff, I
right?
got region stuff, I got.
Tons of them, right? Which which is great, right? There are things that I have been working on that I want to push out the door, but we don't always have time to work on those things. So what we're trying to do moving forward is to carve out a little time for, and I want to call them pet projects, for uh, the projects that we feel are important to the overall health of the game. Because the things that Matt and I are looking at are not just like, oh, I really want to do this because I think it'd be nifty, right? It's more these are changes that a section of our player base will really enjoy. That someone is really going to engage with and really wanted to play on the regular basis, right? And we don't really have a lot of that time built into our scheduling. So one of my goals internally is to give us some of that time and also make it so that we're addressing a lot of these long standing pain points that have existed inside of the game for a long period of time to make sure that we start addressing them. Because what happens so often is that we've got a laundry list of bugs, and because, oh well, that bug's 3 years old, is it really that big of a deal anymore? Well, yeah, it was a big enough deal at the point where it was created that yes, we should go back and revisit it. It's just a matter of really sitting down and saying this is what we're going to do. And I think that's where we're kind of moving things, is that we're earmarking one of our releases every year to tackle some of those things while we're doing other smaller bits, but also giving the designers some opportunity to develop the things that they really want to do that are going to have a positive impact for the player base. And I think that's going to end up really benefiting the game on the whole and benefiting the player base on the whole.
I think one of the like interesting cultural shifts that will happen on the team when that happens is like I've managed to earmark myself time every year to work on those kinds of things. But I think a lot of the team is not used to having that opportunity, whether it
Yeah.
is they they basically roll right out of like finishing the expansion pack into then working on the next thing that has to happen like immediately. There's not as much time allocated for just like take a breath, ideate, build. And I think that is something that is different and novel for our team to have an opportunity to do, because we've always been this team that has always just been and next and next and next and next.
Yep.
And having that opportunity to take a break and look at the game and look at the ideas that you've had and see where they can kind of fit into what was just made or what is going to be made, or even if there's just a gap somewhere, like this could fill this niche. And so I think that is something that we will need to talk to the team and be like, okay, no, really, you can do this. You can do this. It's
Yeah.
okay. Do this.
And by take a break or take a breath, we don't mean we stop working, right? Like it's more, hey, like explore the things that are going to uh, really kind of inspire you creatively. Because, like Matt just said, going from one task to another becomes really monotonous, and honestly, it can kill a lot of the creative aspect of things. And I think one of the great things about being a game designer, aside from making something that brings joy to people out in the world, is it really does fulfill something inside of you that you need to do. It's the expression that
Mm-hmm.
you get to put out into the world, right? It's that's the thing that I enjoy about it, is that I can put something out there and get the feedback on it. Sometimes it's good, sometimes it's Marta Corbo, right? It is what it is, and I learn from mistakes. I try not to recreate the same ones, and I try to do the next thing better. And that's basically what it all comes down to, is that you're putting things out there for people to enjoy, and when you find the things that work, you do a lot of those repeating. You do a lot of those things again, right? But then you want to expand, and you don't want to just rest on the things that were successful before. You want to push. You want to see, well, what's the next thing that might make a lot of sense?
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of the approach that I think we've been taking is kind of making those incremental adjustments rather than trying to do something massive. And I think that's where we need to continue doing, right? Is just taking those little steps forward, those little steps forward, those little steps forward, and then reveal like the big thing that we've been working toward. And honestly, if we're going to look at anything that was like that from a successful standpoint, I think the Mordor and Angmar are great examples of that because it was
It's
the culmination of so many little steps.
and I think it's something too that is like one of the things that I'm really appreciative about with the community is, well, yes, there have been expressed frustrations about this thing or that thing in the game. There is a like community patience as we like work on these little things here and move this forward. I think like housing is probably the prime example of how we've just like take one step forward, one step forward, one step forward, one step forward, and that while it does not result in the like full final product immediately, I think it's a great way for the community to see that yes, we're slowly working towards something. And I think that holds true for a lot of the different things that we've been building over the last several years where it's like we're slowly working towards an end result that is even more compelling than each like individual step along the way.
Yeah, I, because I mean, if you look at again, I'm going to just point to the legendary release last year, right? If you look at all of the incremental steps that went into that, right? The initial difficulty system being added to the game, and then the changes that Vastin was able to make things go for the ring wraiths, and then pushing the tech just a little bit with the rings. I really kind of, and again, this is more like me. I don't want to give too much away here, but that gives us some of the underpinnings toward the future. And it's good because it showed that these incremental changes that we've been making over the past few years can lead to successes and can lead to things that people really enjoy. And the more that we can continue to do that, the better off we're going to be.
Well, and you know we've talked a little bit about it too, but the stuff that happened with the ring wraith, like that's an opportunity for other designers to take a look at what was done and put their own spin on it. Not to suggest that I've been doing that, but that sort of thing too, where it's like we all learn from each other. We all like the stuff that Vastin figured out how to do is something that then can benefit other designers as they're trying to figure out their own things that they want to use to make a mark on something, put a stamp on something.
Yeah. Uh, do the what are the advantages of the new servers that give to us as designers and creators? Um, it's not that's the new servers is totally not about us and what we can do. It's about letting you play the game in the way they're supposed to be played. So I guess what it does is it lets us let you play the game the way that
And
you should be able to play the game, right?
it has come with some advantages of like in preparation for this, we have
Yeah,
had our like server engineers and whatnot be able to spend the time to create some tools that can help us better evaluate how performance run on the servers is running. It's also done things like given us a window into how to better build spaces, knowing having done that like analysis of old servers, new servers, it gives us an opportunity to look at and say like, okay, we know when a land block has this many assets on it, or this many players on it, or this many monsters on it, or a path map that's this complex, it does this. And that gives us a window into,
yeah,
okay, maybe we can make this perform better if instead of having a market that is bespoke with all the tables individually decorated with everything, if we go to art and say, hey, can we take this and turn it into a single object instead, that'll make the server happy. And we learn about that. We know about that now because of the analysis that we got from the tools in preparation for a broader rollout of 64-bit servers. So yeah,
yeah,
it
yeah,
hasn't specifically directly changed like how we design content, how we design world, but it has allowed us to better think about how we might build those spaces, being aware of the performance, being better aware of the server side performance implication of certain things.
yeah. I mean, I guess I was kind of discounting the fact that the probably the biggest thing that we were able to learn and discern from the inclusion of the 64-bit servers with the the Veil of the Nine event is that we now have a better understanding of what the limitations are in the things that we can develop for public performance spaces, right? So uh, it, we know some of the difficulties that exist with our effect system, right? We've known that for years. We've known like why the effect system has some significant impact to the performance in the overall game. We were hoping that the 64-bit server like eliminated that, right? In the ideal world, in the utopian example, that problem just magically goes away and we don't have to worry about it ever again. The reality set in, and we looked at it and we said, okay, so we can't really effectively have more than X people hitting one monster at a given time, which gave us the ability to say we have to find a better solution to this, right? So that was great. It gave us a little bit more insight and allowed us to make those changes. Um, I do want to answer a question that I just saw in the stream real quick from Billy Ostrich. So there is a massive complexity behind the way that our tuning goes. The biggest thing with hunters right now, and this is probably going to make a lot of hunters upset. The biggest problem with hunters right now is not their baseline damage. The biggest problem with hunters right now is that statistically, their set bonuses from the past few set bonuses that they had put them at a better spot overall than they are currently, right? So a lot of this comes down to the layers of systems that we have built into the game and how that balancing act between them all kind of culminates in the final output of damage, right? So it's not a simple thing for us to say, oh yeah, we can just throw a 15% bonus on hunters and they'll be fine, because that isn't necessarily true. We could add 20% to hunters, and maybe their output would be better. But when you put them against, and this isn't meant to offend, but when you put them against players who are out there who know how to really utilize some of the inherent flaws to our combat system, who are still sending us parses or can still show us parses, damage parses, where they are maintaining uh, their damage within, 2 to 7% range of what other people are considering the top dogs in the game right now, mostly Minstrel and Loremaster. Um, it's one of those things where we kind of have to be careful, because if you make a change that seems like it's super beneficial for the whole, it may end up being something that really throws the balance out in another area. So it's very difficult. It's really difficult to to figure out like where those things have to happen, which is why we are taking a better approach to things and trying to fix things a little bit better. It's not because of the base damage. It's really because uh, the changes that were made ended up affecting the way that the actual hunter ends up dealing damage over time. Sorry, dealing its overall DPS in conjunction with the set bonuses that are available for everybody else. Giving them flat bonuses is not the right answer. It's figuring out exactly how to balance it out with the changes that we're going to end up making in the summertime.
So I think we're just about out of time. We got a couple minutes left. Is there anything that we just wanted to touch on real quick before we wrap it up, or any other questions that are in chat or on the thread that we really wanted to hit?
There was a question about Brawler rework. It's not slated for any time super soon. Um, the main problem that we're seeing with brawlers is their ability to hold aggro in group settings. So we need to figure that one out at some point. And yes, RKs are in the mix too. That's definitely true. But when we sit down and we look at the full damage output from an AOE based LM, they're really high right now.
Cool. Well, again, sorry we're a little like low energy today. Both of us are sick, but
I think we're low energy. I think we're pretty
uh,
high energy for
uh,
being as like not happy as we are.
Well, it doesn't help that it's kind of sort of rainy and gross outside today too. I'm not looking forward to shoveling the ice off of the walkway once it starts getting colder. Um, so yeah, let's see if there are any other quick questions. Otherwise, we should probably wrap it up. But I'm not seeing anything that pops up. Are there any plans on war steeds and or
No,
cosmetics? I think. Well, we're always
no.
planning new war steed cosmetics.
Yes, but do not put any war steed stuff. Totally not.
Um, but I think cosmetics are a big thing. Like seeing some of the anniversary cosmetics that are being worked on. Those are looking great. I'm really looking forward to Art hopping on board with the all of the work that they need to be doing for the expansion pack later in the year. We actually just had our monster meeting to talk about what creatures we want to put on landscape for that. Those are always fun meetings because we have Chris Pearson digging out the weird mythological creature compendium and just throwing some absolutely bonkers monsters just up for people to look at. Not that he's even suggesting them, but it's like, here's this weird thing that's the body of a worm, but the tail that has a human face at the end of it, and fun stuff like that. Alrighty. And then there were a few people that were asking about camel mounts. I'm not sure what mounts we have planned for over the course of the year. I think I think we've got some initial concepts for what we're doing, but nothing that I would want to talk about as far as specifically what kind of animals are being introduced for mounts this year.
Yeah, we're not ready to talk about that yet.
Alrighty. Well, I think that wraps it up for us. I guess maybe the last question is Chris Crash is are you not being held back enormously in the development of the game by the old engine? We'll use that as
No,
our cutoff for this.
no,
I
I'm going to say
think
no.
I think for me, I am always of the mindset that restrictions breed creativity,
Yeah.
and while the game is old, the engine is old, it makes you have to think a little bit more creatively about the work you're doing and how you can achieve things um, within the constraints of what you have. And sometimes that means, sometimes things can happen and you can do the work. Other times you need to be like, okay, well, I need engineering support for that. So,
Yeah, I mean, I don't think it holds us back. I think it just forces us to solve some problems creatively, and not necessarily in a manner that is succinct. There are things that I would love to do that I sit down and I look at and I say, "Oh, in order to make this work, I have to use 10 different objects instead of two." Whereas if we were using a more modern engine, maybe it would be the two objects rather than the 10.
yep,
It doesn't make it impossible, it just makes it more difficult.
more hoops to jump through.
Exactly.
All right. All right, everyone. Well, thank you for hanging out with us, asking your questions, and hopefully getting some good answers from that. So I think we have a couple more bull roars due out for update 43 over the next couple of weeks. And then that will be live, which will be exciting. It seems like you all have been working on the instance spaces forever. And I'm not sure what else is going on for events and whatnot in Lotra right now, but definitely pay attention to the message boards, to social media, to this stream, as well as to our new Discord server. If you have not joined yet, feel free to jump in and check it out. People are happily chatting along there. There have been some great screenshot competitions already that players have been running there as well. Um, so yeah, hope everyone has a great afternoon. Thank you for hanging out, and we'll see you next month.
Next month.